So, you're after a small car to get you from A to B, but it can't cost the earth to buy or to run. Well, behind me I've got the Suzuki Celerio, which could be right up your street. Keep watching to find out why. Now let's be honest, looks are always going to be subjective, but if you ask me, for Celerio it looks a little bit bland. Now it's not ugly and the looks are definitely inoffensive, but if you were to park it next to cars such as the Kia Picanto or the Toyota Aygo, I don't think it's going to stand out. Now this is for mid-range SZ3 model, which means that you get 14-inch alloy wheels. Predictably on the base model you have to make do with steel wheels. This model has also been finished in the optional Ablaze red metallic paint, which looks really nice when it's clean, but the car is rather grimy because of the snowy roads in the UK at the moment. If you're wondering how much the Ablaze red will cost you, it's an option that is £465. The inside is quite a basic affair, as you would expect, but Suzuki has tried to spruce it up with a few silver details here and there, plus these seats have got a polka dot design, but yes, it is rather drab in here, and as you would expect, there are plenty of hard plastics, but it's very hard to criticise that because it is a cheap car. That would be like going to a hostel and complaining that there's no spa. And plus these plastics, they do feel rather durable, so hopefully they should stand the test of time. The Celerio is available in 3 trim levels: SZ2, SZ3 and SZ4. The SZ2 is priced from £7,999 and it offers the basics such as CD player, DAB radio, central lock-in, front electric windows, 6 airbags, and that's about it. The SZ3 is priced from £9,649 and this adds 14-inch alloy wheels, Bluetooth, remote central locking and air conditioning. That leaves the range-topping SZ4 model, which is priced at £1,000 more than the SZ3, and it gives you 14-inch polished alloy wheels. It also gives you front fog lamps, rear electric windows and a chrome grille. It's also worth mentioning that there is a limited edition city model, which is priced from £8,499 and it acts as a kind of halfway house between the SZ2 and the SZ3. And that means you get the same features as you would get on the SZ2, but you also get 14-inch alloy wheels. You also get black side mouldings, city edition badges and rear parking sensors, but only 500 of these models will be made, so it's worth bearing in mind when you're shopping around. The front of the Celerio should offer enough space for most occupants, but it's worth noting that you are likely to rub elbows with the person next to you from time to time, but it's a small car. Getting a good driving position is okay, it's not the best. As you would expect, the steering wheel only adjusts for rake and not reach, but the seat has got enough adjustment and there's plenty of headroom as well, so it's not all bad in here. But what about cubby holes? Well, you've got 2 cup holders down here. If it's got a cubby hole here, we can put a smartphone. The glove box is of a decent size, but I'm not too sure about these door bins. They're rather thin and it does make you think what you'd want to put in there. A few letters maybe, a few leaflets, maybe 1 or 2 packets of mints, but yes, they are rather thin, which I have to say is a bit disappointing. But what's space like in the back? Stepping into the back of the Celerio, and you will notice that if you're a taller passenger, your legroom will be limited. Now it's worth noting that the driver's seat has been altered for myself. As always, I'm 6'2", so needless to say, I'm a tall guy, but as you can see, the legroom is definitely restrictive. However, if I were a shorter passenger or if I was sat behind a shorter driver, I would have more space. The headroom is pretty decent though. I've got about ½ an inch spare maybe, so that's pretty good. Now, unlike most of the other cars in its class, you can theoretically seat 3 people in the back of the Celerio. I say theoretically because I'm not too sure you'd really want to. Now, this middle seat, let me scoot over. This middle seat is very slim and I can't picture being able to get comfortable having someone sat either side of me, and I think even a child would struggle to find space in the middle. So yes, you can seat 3 people in the back, but whether you'd want to is another matter. So in all honesty, this car is probably best used as a 2+2. The boot is of a good size, offering 254 litres, which makes it the biggest in class, so it should be more than usable for everyday life. But if you do need more space, you can of course fold down the 60/40 rear seats to give you over 700 litres, but it's worth noting that the rear seats won't fold flat. Underneath the bonnet I have a 1 litre 3-cylinder naturally aspirated petrol engine which produces, wait for it, 67 brake horsepower. That's coupled with 90 newton meters of torque, or if you prefer that in old money, that's 66 pound-feet. There's also an alternative to this engine called the dual jet. It's the same engine, but it has twin fuel injectors, which gives it a bit more torque, and it also makes it a bit more economical. Not that this engine drinks like George Best, of course, but I will talk about economy a little bit later. It's mated to a 5-speed manual gearbox, which, although the changes are rather light and hollow, it's actually pretty snappy. Dare I say it's slick, which is just as well, because it hasn't got a lot of power. You will find you will need to work with the gearbox a fair amount to keep on top of the, well, I would say power, but it's not much of it, is there? But let's be honest, this car will not be bought based on performance. Now, there's also an option for an automatic gearbox, but that's only available on the range-topping SZ4 model, and it will cost you extra. Now, at this point, I normally give you performance figures, but I imagine many of you watching aren't really particularly bothered. But just in case you are bothered, this engine will hit 62 miles per hour in 13.5 seconds, which is very pedestrian to say the least, and the top speed isn't even triple figures. It runs at a puff at 96 miles per hour, but as I said earlier, this car will not be bought because of performance or speed. It's cheap and it's frugal. Bearing in mind that this car will be bought based on value, here is a list of how much its rivals would cost when a similar trim level is selected. In the issue of fairness, I've chosen 5-door models for this comparison, and as you can see, the Hyundai i10 is almost as cheap as the Celerio, but not quite, whilst the Smart 4.4 is the most costly at £11,865. So the Celerio delivers on value, but more features are available with its rivals, such as reversing camera, autonomous emergency braking, cruise control, etc. Yes, this will cost more, but it's worth mentioning in case you find the Celerio a bit too basic. Plus, other cars offer more personalisation if that's something that's important to you. Now, the gearbox may be nice to use, but I'm afraid the steering isn't quite there for me. Yes, it's light, so it's easy to manoeuvre around town, but it's quite vague, and when you're turning, it's a bit too eager to self-centre itself, which I find a little bit annoying. But I imagine to most casual buyers it won't be too much of an issue. The pedals are also nice and light, although I will say that the clutch pedal is a little bit too light and it's a bit springy, so it means finding the biting point is quite difficult, especially when it's very high. So like other Suzukis I've tested, this does have a firmer suspension setup, and it's by no means uncomfortable, but I was expecting there to be a little less body roll in the corners. Now, it's not bad, but a little bit more than what I was expecting. Now, this car can be relatively fun in the corners, but I do feel that the Ford Car Plus offers a more satisfying driving sensation, and the steering is also heavier as well. But the Celerio is by no means a bad car to drive. It's quite pleasant, in fact. It's got enough performance to get you by. Now, let's be honest, this car will be mainly used for town driving, but even on the motorway it doesn't feel completely out of place, but it is noisy. Now, although this car only has 14-inch alloys, there is a fair amount of tyre noise coming from the wheels, and on the motorway this is exacerbated even further because of course you're going at higher speeds, plus there is a fair amount of wind noise as well. So down here I'm doing 40, and yeah, the tyre noise is quite audible, but the wind noise isn't too bad, of course. But get it up to a higher speed and you will have to crank up the tinny stereo quite loud to drown it out. Now, because this car is naturally aspirated, meaning that you need to rev the nuts of it to get any sort of power out of it, it can be quite noisy. So let me slot it into second. Get in there, the rev limiter. That's 5,000 revs. That's pretty noisy. I'm gonna change up. Now, in regards to visibility, that's absolutely fine. I've got no problems whatsoever. The windscreen is nice and big. The door mirrors are of a good size, and the rear windows also of a good size. So yes, seeing out the car is absolutely fine. But if you are a bit of a clumsy parker, then you can have a look at the City model I mentioned earlier, which has those rear parking sensors. But let's be honest, if you can't park this car, then you probably shouldn't be driving. Now this is an area where the Celerio does well. Because it's got the same amount of power as a food blender, it sips away at its petrol rather nicely. Now Suzuki states on a combined run you'll be able to hit 65.7 miles to the gallon, and in my experience I've been getting high 50s, which is pretty good indeed. It's green as well, as it emits just 99 grams per kilometre of CO2 emissions, and that's the same for the automatic as well. But if you want even more economy, then take a look at the dual jet engine, as on a combined run that offers a whopping 78.4 miles to the gallon, and CO2 drops down to 84 grams per kilometre. So that means for the first year of VED you'll pay £100, and then each year after that you'll be paying £140. For the standard engine, for the first year of VED you'll pay £120, and then each year after that you'll be paying £140. Yes, the Celerio may not be the most style-conscious car in its segment, but it offers great value, a decent amount of space, and it's cheap to run. It's also pretty decent to drive as well, so I can definitely see appeal in this car. Thanks for watching, I hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please give it a big thumbs up, and please subscribe for more car obsession.